If I can have your attention, please. We want to welcome everyone here at the chapel as well as all of you that are viewing remotely. For those of you present in the chapel, if you have a cell phone with you, please place it in the silent mode or turn it off completely. Officiating today is Rabbi Michael Schwab from North Suburban Synagogue, Bethel in Highland Park. The interment will immediately follow the service at West Lawn Cemetery, and our procession will be forming in the parking lot. We will make sure that your car receives an orange funeral sticker as well as a flag for on top of your vehicle. And please use your bright headlights at all times in the procession as well as your emergency flasher lights. The Shiva will be observed at the Pollack residence at 660 Wilmot Road in Deerfield, following the interment today until 5 p.m., and then Saturday evening from 6:30 p.m. until 8:30 p.m. And just note that there's no actual parking on Wilmot Road, so you have to either park on Marcy Court or Wilmot School, and both of these are just one block north of the house. So there's no parking on Wilmot Road at all. Following the service, I'm going to be asking the pallbearers to please step forward to help escort Robin's casket from the chapel. They are Andy Pollack, Josh Pollack, Michael Vesley, Gary Morrison, Diane Garber, and Corky Kessler. At this time, I'll ask everyone to please rise as the family enters the sanctuary.
You may be seated. We're going to begin the services for Robin Pollack with her brother Greg chanting from Psalm 23.
Mizmor LeDavid, Adonai roi lo echsar, binot asher yarbitzeni, al mei menuchot yenahaleni. Nafshi yeshovev, Nafshi yeshovev, Yancheni v'maglei tzedek leman shemo. Gam ki elech begeitz almavet lo irara. Ki ata imadi shivtecha umishantecha hema yanachamuni taroch lefanai shulchan Taroch lefanai shulchan, Taroch lefanai shulchan, neged sorerai, Dishanta vashemen roshi, Dishanta vashemen roshi, Dishanta vashemen roshi, Kosi revaya, ach tov v'chesed, ירדפוני כל ימי חיי ושבתי בבית אדוני ושבתי בבית אדוני לאורך ימים. Yadadai dai dai dai, yadadai dai dai dai, yadadai dai 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 dai, yadadai dai dai dai, yadadai dai dai dai, yadadai dai dai.
Thank you for the moving chanting of Psalm 23 in the Hebrew. If you'll kindly open your service folder, we can now read in translation what Greg so beautifully chanted in the Hebrew. Let's read together. The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. He maketh me to lie down in green pastures. He leadeth me beside the still waters. He restoreth my soul. He leadeth me in the paths of righteousness for his name's sake. Yea, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil, for thou art with me. Thy rod and thy staff, they comfort me. Thou preparest a table before me in the presence of mine enemies. Thou anointest my head with oil, my cup runneth over. Surely goodness and mercy shall follow me all the days of my life, and I will dwell in the house of the Lord forever. That is our prayer and our belief. Let the spirit of Robin dwell in the house of the Lord forever. I'm now going to call on Rabbi Michael Siegel, the senior rabbi at Anshe Emet Synagogue, to say a few words and to recite a psalm.
As we gather today to pay tribute in loving memory to Robin Lynn Pollack, the Torah speaks to us. The portion of this week, as we end the book of Bereshit, is Vayechi, and he lived. And ironically, it's a portion about the death of Jacob. Vayechi, and he lived. A reminder that our lives are more than what happens as we walk on this earth, but the resonance of our lives, when they are well lived, that continues on beyond the grave. Certainly it was for Jacob. The rabbis tell us that Jacob was the first person in history to suffer illness. None of the patriarchs and matriarchs, Adam and Eve, none of them suffered illness. They simply were taken from this world suddenly. And the rabbis go on to say that the fact that Jacob was suffering from illness gave those around him time to prepare for his death. In a way, the illness was a comforting factor for the family to prepare. Robin was taken so suddenly. The burden for the family is much greater as a result. The shock of being here on this day is felt by all who knew and loved Robin, and certainly my wife Janet is amongst those who mourns on this day with all of you. And the pain that Greg and Jay are feeling on this day is immense, as well as the rest of the family. there are two ideas that flow from this week's portion that I would love for you to take with you on this day. The first is the idea of Vayechi, that Robin's essence, her ikar, will continue from this day forward through all of the positive things that she did in her life, the lives she touched, the difference that she made. And secondly, what sustains us at times like this is our faith in God, that God walks with us, that God supports us, even when we walk through the valley of the shadow. So to that in mind that I offer this psalm. Shir Lamalot. Esai nai el heharim, me'ayin yavo Ezri. Ezri me'im Adonai oseh shamayim va'aretz. Al yitain lamot raglecha, al yanum shomrecha. Hine lo yanum v'lo yishan shomer Yisrael Adonai shomrecha. Adonai tzilcha al yad yaminecha yomam hashemesh v'liyakeka v'yareach balayla. Adonai yishmarcha mikol ra. Yishmor et nafshecha. Adonai yishmar tzeitcha v'oecha me'ata v'yad olam. I will lift up my eyes to the mountains. What is the source of my help? The source of my help is the Lord, creator of heaven and earth. God will not let you falter. Your guardian does not slumber. Surely the guardian of Israel neither slumbers nor sleeps. God is at your right hand to protect you. The Lord, your keeper, gives shelter. The sun will not smite you by day, nor the moon by night. The Lord will guard you from all harm. The Lord will preserve your soul. God will guard your going and coming from this time forth and forevermore.
I'm going to chant from Psalm 15. Mizmor LeDavid. Adonai mi agor bo alech, amishkon behar kodshecha holech, tamim ufoel tzedek, v'dover emet bilvavohu, lo ragal al shono lo asal re'ora v'cherpal al asal krovo, nivze beinav nimas, v'etirei Adonai yechabed, nishpal arav v'lo yamihir, kaspo lo natan v'neshech, v'shochar anakila lakach, osei lo yimot le'olam. Psalm of David, do we deserve to enter into God's sanctuary? Can we merit a place in the presence of God? If we live with integrity, do what is right, speak the truth, have no slander upon our tongue, do no evil to others, do not mistreat your neighbor, spurn those who are contemptible, honor those who revere God, never retract a promise once made, though it may bring you harm. Lend no money at unfair rates, accept no bribe against the innocent. Make these deeds your own, and you shall stand firm forever. Rabbi Sadoff from Melbourne sent me some notes that in her community, Robin was seen as somebody who never harmed others, never spoke evil about others, and was a very wonderful presence in her community there. We believe that, as the psalm says, somebody who lives life accordingly will always have a place in our hearts, even if they're physically no longer present. Their legacy will be passed down to all of those who she affected, and of course, her soul will remain with God forever and ever. Now I want to turn to the people who knew her best. I want to ask her brother Jay to say some words first.
Seems like we just did this, not that long ago. Before I get started, I just, everyone has one of these. I have to tell you, you have no idea how many emails went around before we finally decided which picture was going to be on the cover of Robin's Robin's ending place. I feel kind of like the opening act here. My little brother insisted that I go first. I'm not, sure because he's the main event, or whether or not he just wants me to warm up the crowd. I'm not sure. I'm not sure which it is. The standing joke in our family, speaking of this, just doing this last year, basically, not barely a year ago, is how much Robin was turning into Joyce. She did not like that. She did not like that analogy, shall we say, very much. But those of us close to her knew that, in fact, she was turning into her mother, and not even step by step. I mean, just like a rapidly turning into Joyce. Pretty much everyone here knows that Robin and I did not see eye to eye on the world. I was busy raising 5 children, running a practice. She was out gallivanting around the world, having a great time. But nonetheless, she did Robin. That was her. Robin did what Robin did. And she had a good time doing it. And you got to admire someone who led a life doing all the things that were important to them and trying to get a lot filled into her 65 years. She did a lot, especially the last 30 years or so. And even towards the end, it seemed like she would say, well, I don't have a job right now, but then she'd find a piece of contract law to do to pay for her next trip. And so that was pretty much her cycle. Let's get a 90-day contract somewhere, and I'm going to go somewhere for a month or two and keep doing that all over the place. So she did a lot of that. I'll leave most of the storytelling to Perfect Baby Brother, as Robin would refer to Greg. But there are a few, I think, that are worth mentioning. So the one memory I have the most of Robin and an interaction with the family, so when I got married in Louisville to Bonnie like 40 plus years ago, Robin got up and did a toast. And she proceeded to spend probably 10 minutes listing all the devilish things I did to her when we were kids. So you can only imagine the look of horror on Mom and Dad's face as Robin is sitting there just saying, I threw her down the stairs, I pushed her to this, I did that, I reached my arm through the pane glass in her French doors to get to her one day. And they're looking at her like, how can you be doing this in front of all these people? I, of course, loved every minute of it. I thought it was great. It was a chronology of our childhood, basically, and all the things. In fact, I always used to say the only time Greg and I never got along was when he was defending his sister. That was like the only time, because he'd try and step between little brother, and he didn't have much of a chance, but he would try anyways, and I admired him for that. So once Robin started traveling, when the kids were little, she always came back bearing gifts for the kids. From Tasmania, not Hong Kong, because they were really young back then, but mostly from Tasmania and Australia. In fact, I remember her coming back one time with Josh wanted a boomerang. He wanted a boomerang so badly. So Robin, the way Robin is, of course, she didn't get him a boomerang that you could actually use. She got a pretty one that's supposed to sit on the shelf. Well, he didn't know that. He was, 6 or 7 years old, maybe? So he went out as soon as, she hadn't even taken her coat off and put her purse down yet, I think. He's out there in the backyard flinging it, okay? Well, next thing you know, it's broken in half. And he's all upset because he broke this beautiful boomerang. And Robin was like, what did you do? It's a boomerang. I'm supposed to play with it. That's the whole idea. And finally, there's dining out with Robin. It's going to a restaurant. I mean, the stories are just, I don't have enough time to tell you all the stories. How many of this room have ever returned a bottle of wine because they thought it was no good? Or a handful of people, okay? I can promise you, Robin returned more bottles of wine than all of you combined. And that was probably in just any given year. Okay, she was a complete wine snob. Dad's favorite place was Kiki's restaurant. And that was always where we went to celebrate birthdays and stuff, and Kiki's no longer exists. But one night she returned 2 bottles in one night. One night, and like we were hiding under the table. We are totally hiding under the table. It was really gratifying to read a lot of the posts that both her old friends and contemporaries posted, on the site in memory of Robin. And some of the words that were used sum up my sister so much. Quirky, for example. Worldly, of course. Smart as a whip. I was the family dummy. I had two very smart siblings, and I had a 90-mile-an-hour fastball. I mean, that was basically, that's what I brought to the table. So, one of a kind. I saw that on more than one occasion in those posts. Adventurous. She was all those things, and I think that's a perfect summary of my sister. For all those reasons, she will be missed. At least now Mom and Dad have their favorite daughter with them. So God knows what's going on up there right now. I can only imagine what it is. So yes, Ribs, I will miss you. May you rest in peace.
Thank you, Jay. And now I'm going to call Julie to say some words.
Can't see. Have to tell me, can you hear me? Not used to microphones. Is that good? Yeah, do the best you can. I'll do the best I can. Okay, hold on. I have to prepare. It's amazing how similar some of the things I've written here are what Jay said. I'm not shocked. So, aside from all the significant others, fiancés, spouses, and children of the younger generation, the youngest being Robin's great-nephew, baby Logan Dart, who have or will become part of the Pollack family, I am probably the newest member, even though Greg and I have been together almost 18 years and married for almost 13. A few days ago, I shared the details of Robin's death on Facebook. I tagged her because I could see a list of at least 75 friends when I went to her page. And we were unsure how to contact many of them otherwise and didn't know what to expect when news of her sudden death reached them. So almost immediately, I received several direct messages from across the globe, literally, particularly from her group of Hong Kong friends and her former colleagues. Over and over, I read heartfelt expressions of grief, disbelief, and shock, along with inquiries about what had happened to her and offering all methods of support, both in person and from afar. I've learned a lot about Robin from these exchanges, so much so that I actually wanted to share some of them with you today. I'm also including some excerpts from other messages that Greg received directly by email. And at the end of this, there's quite a lengthy one, but I think summarized Robin pretty accurately from one of her friends in Melbourne. But before I do that, I wanted to share some of my own thoughts about my unique sister-in-law. I remember when I met Robin. I had a lot of trepidation about meeting her because I knew that she and Greg were really close. I knew that she referred to Greg as PBB, perfect baby brother, which mostly, but not always, was said with fondness. She said that everyone thought she and Greg were twins because they looked so much alike. And Jay used to give them both grief because of their Ivy League education and tastes, and he has never been known to mince words, as you probably heard from his remarks. So the first time we met in Chicago, it was kind of awkward. I don't think Robin knew what to expect from me either, other than I was a Lutheran minister's daughter who grew up in Iowa and had apparently stolen her brother's heart. We did share the same law school, though I graduated from Northwestern 5 years after Robin, so we never crossed paths. And we also shared a love of fine jewelry. She was pretty skeptical, or was likely skeptical. Conversation was not easy. She kept telling me I looked like a wholesome Midwesterner, which I translated as shiksa. True. I remember she told me numerous times about how much she loved Greg and that she had loved him first. She was possessive of him. I would respond it wasn't a competition, but I always felt that while I knew she liked me, she also resented me a bit for taking her place. So we made our first trip to Tasmania in 2009 to visit Brad and Robin. I was very excited about going to a new part of the world. We spent the entire 12 days of that first trip with Robin. When Robin picked us up at Launceston Airport in Tasmania, she started talking, and I don't think she ever stopped talking for that entire 12 days. Greg, I think, would remember it this way too. She planned this jam-packed itinerary. We came to understand why she loved Tasmania so much. It's one of the most beautiful places, truly. Her home and gardens were lovely. We traversed the island. We went from the warm east coast of Coles Bay and hiked at Wineglass Bay. We went to the northern wine region along the Tamar River. And we went to the frigid west coast region on the Indian Ocean, where, while we wore parkas, Brad educated us on Aboriginal history. Both Greg and I have wonderful memories of our many trips to Australia. And now I need water. So, okay. Unfortunately, I never felt that I really got to know Robin as well as I would have liked, even after all these years. We only saw her once a year, and she communicated mainly with Greg. In the last few days, Greg and I were talking about the two different Robins. She created her own parallel world in Hong Kong, then Australia, and in Paris, and she fully immersed herself into that world. She was very happy, comfortable, and secure in there, where she could be her own one-of-a-kind self. She loved her house in Melbourne and being Australian. She had a close group of friends, and her quirky nature was appreciated by those who knew her. We suspect it was jarring for her to jump back into this world when she came for her yearly visits, where old patterns and memories interfered. But reading all of these comments gives us some comfort to know how much she was loved by so many and how much they will miss her. So I'm going to read some of these passages. These were from the Facebook notice that I did, and there was actually one woman in Hong Kong who reached out to me and wanted to do a private Facebook group for the Hong Kong contingent so they could share photos and comments and things like that, which she did. She asked me to do it first, and I said, I don't know who all these people are, but so she set it up, and they've been sharing all additional posts and pictures that we'd never seen from Robin in her Hong Kong days. So these are just some quotes. Robin had been such a large part of all of our Hong Kong experiences, our youth, our travel, adventures, unforgettable gatherings, challenging, in uppercase, hikes, and so much more. In fact, I was just speaking of our hike 2 days ago as I was on that very same trail. I'm not sure if you'll get this message, but I used to work with Robin. I've heard the heartbreaking news of her passing. Robin was very loved by her Melbourne friends, intelligent, witty, sincere, creative, committed to her faith. I'm so saddened by her passing. I was friends with Robin since 1986 when we worked together at Keck in Chicago. After she began her travels, we stayed in touch, although not in person, for over a year. I'm so very saddened to hear that she has passed. Please share my deepest condolences with all of your family. I'm in shock, as are many, at hearing the news of our beloved Robin. I'm sending you love and prayers for a gentle transition into a life without her. I've lit a candle for her here in Hong Kong, and I'm sending all of my love for a safe journey home. May her memories be a blessing. Robin and I worked together in Melbourne for years, and we were good friends. We had become quite close the last few years, and particularly since her mother's passing. May they rest in peace together. Each year, we celebrated Robin's birthday at her favorite French restaurant near her home, Chez Bagou. She enjoyed steak frite, chocolate fondant cake, and always drank too much wine. We laughed a lot. She was so funny and quirky. I loved hearing about her life adventures, including her love for you and her family. We stayed in close contact when she went overseas this year, and our last messages were in November when she got back home. I feel awful for not seeing her before the holidays. I know she had struggled with her mental health after your mom's passing. She was in great spirits in May and June when we had last had dinner and went shopping. And she bought so many things, as Robin always loved shopping, which we know. So this one, these last couple, this one I thought was very interesting. It said, Robin hosted many memorable parties for our dragon boat team at her beautiful home. So she did dragon boat, like crew, but in Hong Kong it's dragon boats. And they called her house Pollack's Path. There was actually called Pollack's Path? Okay, wow. There you go. And the HK gang truly became the HK gang, largely as a result of her gracious hospitality. Our Robin was truly the hostess with the mostest. I remember one day we opened the balcony doors and a cloud literally floated into the living room. Pure magic. I will always remember our new angel when I look up at the clouds. So this is the last one that just, we thought this guy knows Robin. I met Robin through Allie, one of Robin's closest friends. I have forgotten the initial time we met, but remember that Robin was living in Tasmania and came to Melbourne occasionally for a break. One of those times, a few people were having a Mexican dinner, including margaritas, at Allie's. And through all the chatter and talking and laughter, shock horror, we discovered that the Cointreau, a major ingredient for margaritas, had run out. Robin and I took matters into our own hands and headed straight down to the bottle shop to replenish the supplies. Robin shared her stories and love of Tasmania while we walked. Those that knew Robin realized she was, I believe, the unofficial ambassador for Tasmania. She loved the island, she loved the time she spent there, had dozens of stories that included Brad, her partner at the time, and her garden, and her house, and the weather, and on and on and on. She was also a connoisseur of fine and very expensive wines. She proudly told the stories of how, through her dad, she had learned to appreciate fine wines. She was the unofficial ambassador of Tasmanian vineyards, claiming to everyone that the wines from Tassie were simply the best unknown wines in the world. And then she would pull out a bottle to prove it. It was difficult to argue with her as you shared a glass of some very fine wine. Robin was also a runner, a cyclist, and a gym fitness fanatic. It helped her relax by running 10 kilometers and doing a couple of classes at the gym. Most of us thought that sounded less relaxing than she did. And that helped balance her taste for the finer cheese and pastries and chocolate. You could almost feel the French influence running through her veins. France was her happy place. Since she had spent a year abroad there as a young woman, France held that special place for Robin in living in this cultured environment, speaking a foreign language, and noticing everything that was different in France from the US and Australia. She had spent over 4 months this past year in France. She always talked about flying to France through Chicago, a city she called home from childhood, to visit her mother when she was alive and her 2 brothers. She liked the connection to family. She was also a budding author. She wrote a potentially autobiographical novel, no one's ever seen, about a young woman in France and her experiences there. She wrote and edited, protected, polished, fretted over this novel for years. It's never been published, but Robin always talked about it as her magnus opus and with a smile. Robin was a piano player. She played a baby grand piano at home to calm herself, but also to lose herself in the music. She loved playing it alone. I only ever heard her play when I would walk up to her house. And finally, Robin loved her house. She wanted to live in Port Melbourne and rented there for years, bemoaning the fact that houses in Port Melbourne were so expensive. After she finally bought her house, there was not one time when people would be over for dinner and she did not say, "I love my house." It was a peaceful and relaxing place. May Robin have found that enduring peace and relaxing peace. Bon voyage. So these memories from others are in themselves to us a blessing, and we thank everyone who shared them with us. Rest in peace, Robin, we hope. So.
Well, I guess it's perfect baby brother Greg's turn.
It's not that many, don't worry. Well, I had a couple of long flights to organize my thoughts to and from Melbourne. I would encourage everybody here, if you haven't already, to look at some of the pictures that I brought back from Melbourne that came from Robin's home, to see the various periods of her life. Walking through her house was like walking through a time capsule. And you've heard a lot about her adventures. And if you'll indulge me, there will probably be a little bit of redundancy here, but I wanted to share Robin's journey in my own words. I've been reminded several times over the past 2 weeks, as I've been processing our loss, that I should not just mourn Robin's passing, but also celebrate her life. So instead of wondering why we lost Robin way too soon, I'd like to share her global adventures with you, from her teenage years to her final year. Let's start with high school, where Robin was the classic nerd. She and her friends were intellectual snobs. They even called themselves the sophomore intellectual clique, or SIC. And it was also in high school that she became a Francophile. and thanks to Dad, also developed an appreciation for fine Bordeaux. She worked very hard in high school, starting to manifest a desire for perfection in her work that would grow more pronounced as she aged. By the time she went to college, she was already worldly beyond her years, aspiring to live and work overseas. While at Georgetown, she studied in Paris for a year, further burnishing her Francophile credentials. Upon graduation, she considered the diplomatic corps, but opted for law school instead. She would have to defer her global ambitions, but not for too long. Law school graduation offered her next window for global exploration, and we were fortunate to share the experience together. Conveniently, I finished my MBA at the same time she finished law school. So off we went to England, Scotland, Norway, Denmark, Switzerland, and of course, France. Then back to Chicago, she started her legal career. She earned her stripes after 5 years at Keck, Mahan and Kate, along with some high blood pressure. And then she went in-house with Amico. And voila, overseas she went at last. You've all heard how she thrived in Hong Kong. This was her dream. What started as a 2-year assignment ended up being 8 years. She had a great home, traveled throughout the region, built a vibrant social life, fell in love, but alas, because she couldn't live in Wyoming, it wasn't meant to be. Having achieved truly successful professional achievement, truly satisfying professional success, it was time for her next great adventure. Or as I say, most lawyers would rather be novelists. What began as a 6-month sabbatical to secluded Tasmania to write her novel turned into the next quarter century of her life. Did she write her novel, you might ask? Yes. And then she rewrote it, and rewrote it, and rewrote it. You get the idea. Remember that early manifestation of perfectionism? And then, as often happens, life throws you a curveball. Or in this case, she meets one Bradley J. Watson, AKA the Tasmanian Devil. So no, she never published her novel, which currently runs over 600 pages, but she fell in love and shared life with Bradley for over 10 years. She went on to become an Australian citizen, got her license to practice law in Australia, launching a new legal career, moving to Melbourne, and buying a beautiful home there, which she loved, as you've heard. In between jobs, she'd returned to her novel, using it as a pretense to make extended visits to Paris over the last 2 to 3 years, usually visiting Chicago and Israel on her way to and fro. So Robin had her happy places: Paris, Tasmania, her home in Melbourne, her piano, her shul. She also had both new and enduring friendships everywhere she lived. But as many of you know, she took Mom's passing last year very hard, often commenting on her deep sadness. While Mom never begrudged Robin living overseas all these years, I think she still felt tremendous guilt for not being with Mom in her later years. But I said I wanted to celebrate her life and not dwell on the fact that she left us way too early. So I want to leave you with 2 happy thoughts addressed to my dear sister. First, you wanted to be buried by Mom and Dad, and so you will. Secondly, assuming you actually wanted to finish your novel, Julie and I will do our best to complete it for you. I hope you know how much you were loved. You will be missed.
Family said so many touching words. I'm just going to add a very short few of my own, and afterwards we'll stand, if you're able, for the memorial blessing. Robin Pollack, creative, adventurous, vibrant, unique, a person full of personality and as you heard, many stories and legends. She was into fitness. She was into wine. As you heard, she was whip smart. She loved to travel, and she loved community. And I want to share that she also very much treasured her Jewish identity. She grew up at Bethel, and in her home, where her Jewish identity was nurtured. And I was told by her rabbi that she was very active in her shul in Melbourne until the very week of her death. As Rabbi Sadoff, her rabbi there, wrote to me, she read Torah. She popped in for Friday night services, always insisting that we sing her favorite tune for Yigdal. He said it's hard to imagine Friday nights here in shul without Robin. He also said, what I noticed about Robin was that she never said a bad word about anyone. She was kind and generous and always wanted to share her joy. She was also generous in her participation in our community as well, reading Torah on Shabbat and on high holidays. In short, she was a colorful woman who tried to live her life to its very fullest, who had a loving family, had adoring friends, and who cared deeply about our tradition. She was indeed taken from us way too soon. But as Greg put it, we should focus on all the wonderful gifts she has given to those whom she loved and to the communities in which she was a part. Tihi nishmata tzura b'tzura chaim. May the memory of Lynn Pollack, Rasha Elizabeth Michael Vasara always be for a blessing, and let us say Amen. Please stand if you're able as I recite the memorial prayer. El Malei Rachamim, Shochen Bamromim, Hametzei Menucha Nechona Tachat Kanfei Ashchina, B'malot Kedoshim Utorim Kazora Ki Amazirim Et Nishmat, Raza Elizabeth Michael Vasara, Shalcha Leolamaha, Began Eden Tehei Menuchata, Ana Balarachamim Astireh B'Seiter Kanafecha Leolamim, Utzror B'Tzorah Chaim Nishmata, Adonai Nachalata V'Tanuk B'Shalom Amishkava V'Nomar Amen. Exalted, compassionate God, grant infinite rest in your sheltering presence among the holy and the pure to the soul of Lynn Pollack, Rasha Elizabeth Michael Vasara, who has gone to her eternal home. Merciful One, we hope that our loved one find perfect peace in your eternal embrace. May her soul be bound up in the bond of everlasting life. May she always rest in peace. And let us all say, Amen. Kindly remain standing as we call the pallbearers to help us escort the casket. Yoshev v'seit elyon v'tzel shadai yitlonan. Omar l'adonai matzi mitzudati Elohai avtach bo. V'yotzilcha mipach yakush midever havot. V'vrato yosech lach v'tach nafav tetzeh. Tzina v'sokelav